Okay, this is the second part of chapter 13. Now we're going to be working with what we call the net present value. Then for the opinion of many, this is the best method for us to use. With net present value, what we do is we calculate the present value of each cash flow and then we add them up. We calculate the present value of each cash flow and we add them up. What we are effectively doing is calculating how much each of our cash flow is worth in today's terms. Then we, as we said before, we add them up and see if we're making money in today's terms. If our net present value is positive, it means that we're making money and we will go ahead. If our net present value is negative, it means that we're losing money and we might not want to do that. So let's use the same cash flows as we used in our previous problem, right? In the previous video, chapter 13, part 1, you probably learned how to put the cash flows in our calculator. If we were using a different stream of cash flows, we will hit second function and clear work. Since we're using the same cash flows as before, I'm just going to leave it as it is. I'm going to go to net present value. We're still using a rate of 5%, right? We're going to assume we're using the same rate as before. So just make sure 5% is enter and we go down. There you go, NPV, right? We hit compute and 3752.86. What the calculator is doing is following this formula that is here. Calculating the present value of each of these 5 cash flows, adding them up, and see if you're making money in today's terms. What we have here is that once after we calculate the present value of all of this, we add them up and we subtract our initial investment of $10,000, we're making $3,752.86. Is that a good investment? Yeah, we're making money, right? So that's what we want to do, right? We accept the project if our NPV is positive or equal to 0. Equal to 0 is a little fuzzy, but let's say if it's positive, we accept it. If it's negative, we reject it. Now strengths, well, it's not a ratio, so we're money talks, and works for any type of project. So yes. Now on the other hand, managers might not be very intuitive in when they interpret their results, right? Another two methods: internal rate of return and modified internal rate of return. Internal rate of return is very, very popular. So it's the rate at which net present value is equal to 0, right? So we're going to find, let's say, the maximum rate at which we want to accept our project, right? So we go here and we click on IRR. Note that our cash flows are already in the calculator. If for some reason we have a different problem, we will need to change our cash flows. So we have cash flow right here, IRR, we hit compute. Boom, there you go, right? 20.39%. Now, if you remember, we were mentioning before that we had a rate of 5%. Think of that rate as the minimum you need to make to keep your investors happy, right? Your cost. So if your cost is 5% and with 20% you break even, well, pretty much you're making 15% for you, right? You will accept this project. So yes, this is the formula in which the internal rate of return makes net present value equal to 0. We accept it if it's greater than or equal to the cost of capital, which is the rate that we're going to have. Reject if it's less than. Now, one of the main flaws of internal rate of return is that we need to assume that we have normal cash flows. That is, the first cash flow is negative and the rest of the cash flows are positive. Sometimes we might have negative cash flows in between. This happens in real life. If that is the case, your internal rate of return is going to have multiple solutions. Therefore, that makes it hard to interpret. So in order to address that problem, we will do the modified internal rate of return. So, and we will work with the modified internal rate of return in just a minute, right? One of the main assumptions is, one of the main differences between IRR and NPV is that IRR assumes that we are reinvesting but we're investing our cash flows at IRR, right? It means that if we're making 20%, we are reinvesting at 20%, right? Which is very, very strong. NPV assumes that we are discounting at the same interest rate of 5%, right? Given that difference, given that IRR might be large and we might have a very strong assumption of compounding at a rate of 20%, most people prefer NPV. NPV is a stronger method. Now, as we mentioned before, we have the modified internal rate of return. Let me change this problem a little bit, and let's say that those $3,000 at year 4 are negative, right? So this is not a normal cash flow, right? We have a negative at year 0 and a negative at year 4. When we go to our cash flow, we could delete everything and change it. Since it's only one cash flow that we're changing, I'm going to go down and put a negative sign here and then enter, right? We know that that's the only difference between the previous and the current stream of cash flows. So I'm just going to put a negative sign and that's it. I'm going to go to IRR and then I'm going to hit, actually I'm going to go to net present value and enter 5%. I'm going to go to IRR and I'm going to compute. Our IRR is going to change. Now, see where it says MOD? That's our modified internal rate of return. That's the MIRR. Our MIRR is 0.05%. 0.05%. Do you remember what is the interest rate that we were using? Oh, it was 5%, right? 5% compared to 0.05%. 5% compared to 0.05%, that's a big difference, right? We will not accept this project if we're using this statistic. Since 0.5%, 0.05% is way less than the 5% we need to make to have our investors happy, right? So it is, it corrects the weakness of different streams of cash flows, and well, if we have mutually exclusive projects, it will be a mess. Now, last method, profitability index. I'm going to go back to our cash flow and change this back to positive, right? This is what we had before. Net present value, compute. This is the number that we had before. So profitability index is basically how much are we making with respect to our initial cash flow, right? Actually, that little formula is a little different. This division needs to go all the way down. Needs to include cash flow at year 0, right? So pretty much profitability index. I'm gonna type it in here. I'm gonna insert a text box right here, and I say PI is equal to NPV plus cash flow at year 0 divided by cash flow at year 0. Okay, let's disregard this box and let's keep this one. Gonna make it a little larger, and that's it. So we're gonna be adding up our net present value to the cash flow that we have today divided by the cash flow that we have today. Now, in order for this to work, the cash flow that we have today needs to be positive. Right? It needs to be positive. It needs to be positive. Net present value might be negative. So what I'm trying to say is you keep the sign of net present value, you respect the sign of net present value, and you make cash flow at year 0 positive. So this plus 10,000 divided by 10,000, right? I forgot. There you go. It should be 1.38. 1.38. So your profitability index, basically what it's saying is, if it's greater than 1, you accept the project. If it's less than 1, you don't accept the project. This is closely tied to net present value. So